So the next thing we're going to cover is that we have this first part that we need, but this is only got the one large sized socket for the larger screwdriver bits. Now we want a couple of these, and this is where a pattern will come in handy. So let's just go and make a linear pattern. Now the entity is the pattern. We're going to pattern this guy. So we're going to make a second one. We need direction, so you have to give it a direction to go, and you need like a line or a sketch. Now remember how I was saying you could always use geometry like this, but it's always best to come in and use a sketch. So we're going to take that sketch, we're going to make it visible, and we're going to select that line for the direction. And 25 millimeters, we need a little more gap than that. Let's just go for, we need 24 millimeters in between the two link holes. Plus, we need 11.624 millimeters in between these two holes here. So this hole to this hole, I believe, is 11.6 something. So we're going to say that we need two of them, and we need that distance. So let's just hit enter and see what happens. What it's going to do is that certain mathematical operations can be handled by the system. Let's click into this area here, and we're going to hit F now. So that'll zoom in, and we can see that we get the two parts that we need. So it's going to make a copy. Now remember, when you're doing a pattern, you can always have it so that it adds whatever the pattern to the last one. So like say we wanted to extend this out and just kind of use some of the geometry we had before, so we could maybe move it out and make it add, or we could remove it from something. So you have different things that you can do with the linear pattern. Again, come in here and take a look at the help menu and play with things like that. So we're just going to say that's okay. We'll create the two that we need. Now I mentioned the help menu. Come in here, click on this guy. So you've got the learning center, you've got videos, you have other tutorials. Help will give you sort of an index. It's really good. It's fairly comprehensive. There are a few things that they've missed because this is a developing product, and as it's growing, you'll find that some of the other things are maybe redundant or have changed. So it isn't always 100% correct, but they do a very good job of figuring that out. So back to where we're trying to go is we need to have these guys, these sockets, actually shrink down so that we have them at 4.3 millimeters, and what we're starting with is 6.7. So we need to offset or move those faces. Now we can come in here and we can try to recreate that part, remodel it up, but how about we use the features that we currently have and see what we can do. I'm going to show you a really cool item that we have here. Is up in here you have a move face. So we can take this one face and we can have him move. We can offset him. And in this case, 5 millimeters is too much. We'll just grab that arrow and bring it back, and we can start showing you guys what happens when we move a face a few millimeters. So we can move that in whatever we need to make that that hole the actual size that we want it to be. But it's not necessarily going to work properly. I exited out of that command by accident. So let's just go back into edit and just drag that arrow out a little bit. There we go. And we're going to say that that's okay, and we'll go from there. So the one thing that you'll notice is it takes this chamfer and it kind of adds more chamfer to it, and this isn't something that we want to have happen. So sometimes you need to do a little bit of backtracking. So let's come back from move face. We're going to delete that. You could always suppress it and then come back and fix it. But another cool thing is that you can delete a face. So we want to get rid of this chamfer that we had on this part. So we can come in and delete these faces, and it will get rid of all those chamfers that we had originally put in there. Now the hole that we have with the chamfer should be fine. So we're not gonna edit that chamfer over here, but we're gonna rotate the part around, and we're gonna do the other side, make sure we get rid of the rest of that one chamfer as well. So we can do a lot of these things in sort of one operation. Zoom in on this guy. So now we're gonna select these faces. Rotate around so we can see the other guys. And we'll get rid of that entire chamfer on this guy, which is perfect for what we need. The hole we have is 6.7 and we want 4.3. So let's do a little math. We need to get 6.7 and we need the hole to actually be 4.3. So 6.7 minus 4.3 gives us 2.4 millimeters that we need to offset on its entirety. We actually need to offset 1.2 millimeters on each face to give us that 2.4. Let's go back here to the move face. Once we have that, we want not 5 millimeters, we want to move 1.2 millimeters. Now one thing here is that with move face, I don't want to complicate things too much, but it defaults to offset. So it's just going to offset the face, but you can also move that face along a certain line, or you can also rotate it. But again, these are things that you can come into and work with later. Get really good with the fundamentals as they are, and then we can work on some of the other things like these other features later on. So what we need to do is select all these faces to make sure we get the offset proper. You see that I'm rotating around, and this guy here is kind of getting in the way as far as my view goes. So again, this is one of those where come in and hide it. So now I can actually see everything that I'm supposed to be working on. And we can grab that face, and the final face. And then we have a hex hole that's actually the size that we want for the smaller screwdriver bits. So let's bring that back into focus, rotate around, so we can get these other faces as well. Got all those faces offsetting exactly as we want them, and we're going to hit OK. Now we have a hole exactly what we wanted, and let's add another one of those 1/2 millimeter chamfers that we did before. I know we kind of deleted it, but we're going to add it again. The smaller the bit is, the harder it is to press into these little guys once it's 3D printed. So this is a nice little add-on to make your life much, much easier. Now we have that other part. Let's bring the other one into view here. Let's get a diametric view. Now we have two parts, slight modifications to create the smaller hole. So now we have the two basic tread pieces that we need. And we've also made the spacing in between them what we need it to be. Now we can create some links. To create links, again, you can start using some of the other geometry that you have for different things. In this case, the link is going to be faced right up against that one piece here. So let's just use that, and we're going to create a sketch based off of that face. Then we're going to hit the N key, and that's going to make it normal to this. Hit the F key because that'll bring everything into focus, and then we've got the two parts that we need to actually focus on. If we want to create a couple of holes and join these two pieces with links, let me think how I'm going to go about doing this. We're going to try some different things. So again, we're going to create some construction geometry that we can work with, and I'm going to create a line that's roughly one center to the next. Now sometimes these things will snap. You'll notice that this guy here, this point, snapped to the center of that circle. Sometimes it does, sometimes it doesn't. So we're going to select that circle, we're going to select that point, and we're going to make them concentric with each other. Now if everything worked according to plan, and we select this line, it should be something like 24 millimeters long. And how do I know that? Because down here in the corner, when you select something, it'll tell you the size. It'll give you surface area and all sorts of things like diameters and whatnot. So it's a great reference to always look down into the bottom right corner and go from there. Now we got that one line that exactly as we need it. We're going to do that offset command, or not offset, the slot command. I'm going to grab this guy here. Let's see, what was the original? I believe was 9 millimeters. So what we're going to do is I'm going to zoom out a little bit, or you can hit the F key. And the default was 19, but I believe what we did before was 9 millimeters. Perfect, that looks awesome. We're going to hit the F key again to zoom in so that we can actually catch that one dimension. Let's bring it down somewhere closer and hit the F key again so it'll zoom everything into where we want it to be. Now we have sort of the rough geometry of this link. I'm not going to actually create holes in this yet, and I'll show you why in a second, because we're going to use the hole feature to create countersunk screw holes. We're going to say that that's okay, that's the geometry that we want, and we're going to extrude it. Let's rotate this around, and we want to extrude this area. So you'll notice that when I select on that area, originally the face that I chose to make it on had some of this geometry, and it's picking it up for the extrude, or at least it's removing it, and that's not necessarily what you want. But you can always come in, select on that edge, and it'll close everything off the way you want. But again, it's grabbing the hole, and that's kind of being a pain in the butt. So what we're going to do is we're going to cancel out of those two so we don't have faces. Now it's going to ask us what region or sketch do you want to extrude from. So we're going to say sketch 5. use the entirety of sketch 5. It extrudes out, and you can see that all those holes and everything kind of went away. It really depends on what you're selecting up in here as to what it's going to extrude out. In this case, we want it to be 6.25. That looks about right. So we want it to come out 6.25. And in this case, we're not going to add this area to this part, or to these parts. If we hit add, then it's going to ask us what pieces that we want to add it to. So we have to say add it to this one, add it to that. But that's not the case that we want. We want a new part. So we're going to say OK. And you can see that it's created a rough edge of a link. So a couple of things that I want to do here is now we need to drill some holes. And we also need to maybe lighten this up a little bit. Let's select on this one face here. I'm going to sketch on it. And I'm going to show that sketch that we had from before in the background. I'm going to hit the N key, which will take us normal to the plane that we're sketching on. Now you can see everything. If you're going to drill holes and you're going to use the hole feature, the points that you use need to be on the face of what you're going to drill through. So this is why I'm creating another sketch here. And I'm going to make that sketch so that that point is concentric to that circle, and that point is concentric to that circle, and that's all we need for this whole feature. At this point, I can hide this sketch. Of course, I double-clicked it. So now we've gotten rid of that. We have everything set up with the holes. Let's come into the hole feature. Now what I'm going to do is not a simple hole. I'm going to do a counter bore. I want it to go all the way through the part, so that's fine. A standard, so I'm going to use ISO because I like to use metric, or I have a bunch of metric screws, the M3s. We want to make it clearance, so this will make it big enough that the screw will clear through the hole. It's not going to be a press fit. You're not going to struggle to get it through. The size, you use an M3, and you want to fit normal. I like to have the fit in this case loose, and it sets everything up. So now we choose the sketch points where we want these holes to be, and we'll select there. Now you can see that it's saying, hey, do you want point or part 1, 2, and 3 all for the merge scope? And that's not the case. In this point, we only want to use the third part. Let's cancel out of those two. So now it's only going to cut through our link that we've currently just made, just like that. And we're going to say good. This brings up one thing that I haven't been very good at doing earlier in this, is that each of these parts and everything that you have along here, we have like a bunch of sketches, but what sketch does that belong to? So one thing that you can do is you can right click on a lot of these things and rename them. And you can rename it like initial geometry. These aren't named properly. So when we were looking at what the hole was actually going to go through, it was saying part 1. Well, part 1 out of many, many parts might not necessarily make a lot of sense. So in this case, renaming these, and renaming them especially for when we get into assemblies, is very important. We're going to call this, I'm going to use caps lock. We're going to call this one the large hole tread. Then we're going to rename the next one. And you'll notice that it wasn't going to let me rename it, and that's because I had multiple parts selected. So all I ended up doing is coming out and double clicking in this area here. You can also hit the space bar to deselect a bunch of stuff. Let's rename this. We'll say small hole. And then finally, we're going to have the link. Now that we have everything set up here, this is going to help us out a fair amount as far as making sure that next time we're going to add a feature or cut through something, we'll know exactly what we're doing it on. With these links, just to give it some more aesthetic value, and they don't need to be this big, I want to do a little bit of a cutaway. So I'm going to select on that face, I'm going to sketch, I'm going to hit the N key to go normal to that. Now I'm going to create a line, make it construction geometry. In this case, I'm going to show the origin again. Oh, it's already showing. Okay, so that's the origin's not where I actually want it to be, so that's okay. You'll notice that when I mouse over a line and I come close to the center point, it'll show a box like that, meaning, hey, I'm going to snap to that. I'm going to bring this across, just like that. And you'll notice that the line now is fully black, meaning it's fully constrained from the midpoint there to the midpoint of that. Now, I don't want construction lines anymore. I want to have regular lines. So I can deselect that, but still have the line running. And I'm going to create a line from here to there and to here. Now you'll notice that I'm only doing half of this sketch that I actually want. And there's a good reason for it, because I can get to show you the mirror feature. Okay, so now I'm going to rotate it out a little bit, and that looks about right. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to dimension this guy to that line. And we'll say that looks like a good 7 millimeters should be good. Now the next thing is I need to dimension an angle. I want this to be 45 degrees. So I can select those two lines. And in this case, we sort of have the inverse of 45, which is 135 degrees. So that gives us 45 degrees. And then remember, I want to have everything nice and black. So, and I also want the web of these things to be about 3 millimeters, being the minimum. But this isn't going to cut out everything I need. So what we're going to do is use the mirror. So it says, as soon as you select on it, it says select a mirror line. So we're going to select on this guy here. And at this point, select entities to be mirrored. So I'm going to click on these lines. And it saved me having to redraw and make sure everything's nice and symmetrical. It just closed off everything and made everything super easy to deal with now. Mirror function is another one. It's great. It will be your friend many, many, many times. Let's go into extrude. We want to remove that from this part. I'm going to cut that out. You can say blind, but say through all. That way you don't have to worry about it. And merge scope. So it realizes that if it extrudes out, it's only going to hit that part, and it only selects that part. Sometimes you might want to select these, but it might cause an error. So anyway, all the defaults are good. And now we have a link that looks pretty good. Let's come in and round everything off. And I think 1 millimeter might be a little overkill for these guys, but let's just see what happens. Now, remember I was telling you the order of operations for fillets? This is where it gets kind of interesting. If I select on those guys, what this is going to allow me to do is that as soon as I select on one of these edges, remember we have tangent propagation selected. So as soon as I hit that, if all goes well, oh, it didn't do it this time. Sometimes what it'll do is it'll follow through and grab all these edges for me. You see how it actually followed through and grabbed those edges? In some cases it will grab all of them. In some cases it won't, but the tangent propagation will make your life a little easier. Now we've got all those faces done the way we want. Let's rotate around. Let's just get that back face. We just won't want the face. We want those holes to be the way they are. So we'll just do that one edge and get it all nice and rounded. And we'll say okay. So at this point, things are coming along just great. We have, let's just go to a front view. So now we have all these parts. We've got the tread with the large hole, the tread with the small hole, and a link. Now these kind of move in reference to each other. What we're going to do is we're going to pop these into an assembly. Now a good rule of thumb in this case is that I have 3 parts and all of them move against each other. Now if I was creating a weldment or something that was all bolted together and all the parts don't move in reference to each other, I try to keep them all in a part studio. If I have parts that move in reference to each other, then I wanted to put it into an assembly, because then I can create mates that will allow me to move these parts around and see about all the motions and everything. The next episode, what we're going to cover is, or we're going to jump into assembly for the first time.